Sí.
se dedica. Mira, me dices que estabas buscando doctorado.
Sí. Exacto. Uy, de nuevo está.
Ah,
¿Quién te lo dijo, perdón? ¿De
sí, está
doctorado?
sonando.
5.
Can we please close the doors? Hello, everyone. How are you today? Thank you for replying. So our speaker today is an English as a foreign language, or EFL teacher. He studied at Universidad Santiago de Chile and also holds a master's degree in linguistics. As a researcher, he has conducted research on the role of technology and its main impact on language learning. Currently, he's working for a graduate program at Universidad de Chile, teaching English for academic purposes. Please welcome Francisco Matus.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me? Yes? All right. It is a pleasure for me to be here today. I'll be giving this talk, which is called right there. It's called Challenging Ourselves, Reasons and Myths Behind Learning English. During this session, I'll be talking about some myths behind learning English that you may have. At the same time, I'll be talking about the most frequent reasons for learning English, and I'll be talking about the role of technology when learning English. And towards the end of the session, I'll be extending an invitation to all of you as part of my presentation. So to begin with, we'll start with a video that illustrates a little bit the way you might have felt when you started learning English. Here we go.
Hi, Carlos. How are you?
So, as Denise introduced me a few minutes ago, I'm a teacher of English. I've been teaching English for a long time, which doesn't mean I'm old, but for a very, very long time, for more than 13 years, I have taught at different colleges and universities along the country, and I have also contributed to my area or my field in terms of research and ways to improve the way students learn English. I have also presented at both local and international conferences, but probably as most of the people in this hall, I started from zero, right? So, same as you, I had no English when I entered university and I decided to study English pedagogy. Panicked the first class. I knew some words, but I didn't know how to use them effectively in context. And if I would ever speak, I wouldn't really convey meaning. So it was a long journey because I didn't know whether what I was pronouncing at that time was intelligible or people would understand me. So after a long time, I succeeded in doing so. So I got positive results in speaking in the language and using English. In fact, a few weeks ago, I was talking to some of my colleagues, and none of us managed to find the exact moment we became confident in English. So it just happened. Out of the sudden, we were speaking and using the language. So there wasn't really a specific moment we could utilize English in our everyday conversations or in class. It just, as I said a few minutes ago, it happened like a miracle. So it was definitely a long path and a long journey, as illustrated here in this slide. And in my opinion, it was the combination of three main components. First of all, it was a lot of exposure, which means I listened to English as much as I could. I read in English every time I had the opportunity, and I got exposed to English in class and beyond the class. Second of all, it was a lot of practice, not only with my classmates at that time, but also with my teachers, my professors, and also with every single native speaker I had access to, and I could practice the language. And third of all, and very important, a very important aspect was a lot of personal and hard work, right? Definitely, people learning English at that time, in my time, as you can see here on the slide, had different and little access to English as probably you do have now. I can see now a lot of people with their mobile phones, okay, with online connection, which may be fantastic to learn English. And at that time, as you can see there, then, if I wanted to listen to, because I'm a music lover, so if I wanted to listen to my favorite bands and new records, I had to buy their CDs and their albums. That was the only possibility. And also, if I had to write a research study or if I had to write a paper, I had to go to the library so as to consult different sources, right? I had a mobile phone at that time, as you can see there, but I had no access to any applications to learn English, and I had no access to online dictionaries or any sophisticated devices or applications. Nowadays, as you can see there, we've got more access. There are online websites, online dictionaries. We've got iPhones now, more sophisticated stuff, and also online dictionaries or digital translators, which may make people learn better. Now, I've got a question before I decipher and tell you whether this is real or not, but before that, this is the kind of exposure I had at university.
Page 4, Lesson B, Names, 1.
Okay, so definitely that was the only access I had as term. So this was also technology, but definitely a different kind of technology because now you've got more advanced media and multimedia. So now, is this a myth or a fact? I want you to please talk to the person next to you. You'll have 1-2 minutes whether you believe this is a fact or a myth. It says, can people learn English better because of technology? What do you think? You've got 1 minute. Can people learn better? Yes. All right, so would anybody like to say something about this? Is this a myth or a fact? Denise, could you please help me out? Don't be shy. Just practice. Remember the 3 tips. Come on.
I think it's true
All right. Why?
because now we have a lot of opportunities to learn English.
Okay.
Before they don't have it.
Okay, good. Yes. Any other contributions over there? We've got one girl over there, Denise. We'll go back there. Okay, so what's...
Hi.
Hello.
I think that people can totally learn English better because of technology, because from personal experience, I learned a lot of English by watching American YouTubers,
All right, yes.
such as PewDiePie.
Okay, good. Yes. Denise, there's another woman over there. Yeah, right there.
I
Hello?
think that it depends.
Okay.
It is not necessarily better learning. There's obviously more access to ways to learn English, like YouTube, Spotify, or watch TV shows in English.
All right.
But a person can only really learn English if it wants to learn English. I mean,
So
you
it's a lot about
can
motivation.
easily go and translate a word, and you're not learning English. You're just translating. I think there must have like, I don't know how to say it. You have to want to learn English.
All right, good. Okay, that's enough, yeah, thank you. All right, so I think she nailed it, all right? That's quite good. In fact, we use technology because we want to expose you to the language. That's the main reason why we've got online platforms and we've got, of course, access to English. We offer access in other ways. However, even though we've got all these applications, as you can see there, Netflix, you've got YouTube, you've got new applications, Kahoot, and then also Open English courses, evidence shows, and this is very important for your quiz, evidence shows that a combination of traditional methods along with technology would be more effective than just technology. Nobody learns the language by mere exposure. You can benefit, of course. You can learn new words, new expressions. In fact, researchers like me and my colleague over here, we are constantly exploring the mechanisms behind language learning and the cognitive demands or requirements for you to learn English. So as I said a few minutes ago, somebody mentioned about YouTubers, yeah, but no one learns a language because a language is a more complex thing than learning words or grammar or translating literally from Spanish by mere exposure or by watching television. There are no cases like that. So you learn languages in a more sophisticated way and as a social phenomenon. So you need to have access and practice the language and apprehend, absorb grammar, vocabulary, and improve your pronunciation. And then obviously technology can facilitate and improve this process, but there is something beyond and more sophisticated than that. Now, I'll be referring to reasons for learning English. There are several reasons for learning English. You may have yours as well. But in my opinion, the most important reason, or one of the most important reasons for learning English, is the fact that English is lingua franca. Lingua franca is a common language, as you can see there, a common means of communication for speakers of other first languages. What I'm trying to say is like English is like a bridge. So different communities can interact one another, not just linguistically, but they can also interact in terms of culture. You can talk about your personal life, you can talk about the music your culture brings with you, you can share your background as well. So there are many other reasons and purposes, and the fact that English is lingua franca means, and this is an example, if you're attending a meeting and there are people who come from different nationalities or from different countries and they've got different nationalities, the language that will take over and will dominate that conversation will be English. It won't be Korean, it won't be Italian, and definitely it won't be Spanish, all right? So that's why we normally learn English as a foreign or second language, so that we can get to know other people from other cultures, and then definitely it has a huge impact on academic purposes as well, right? Now, what is your reason, or if you already speak English, what was your reason for learning English? You have 1 minute to talk to the person next to you and mention the reason that drove you to study English. Come on. Beg your pardon?
Would you like to hear some answers as well?
Yeah, just bring one or two answers because of time. Thank you very much. All right, time is up then. So would anybody like to mention his or her reason for learning English? Anybody? Any volunteer to talk about your reason for learning English?
Hi, my name is Joaquin,
Hello?
and my reason was because I wanted to travel abroad.
All right.
So back in the high school, I knew that I wanted to travel and meet people, and not all because I'm going to be a businessman. So that was my reason. So.
All right, thank you very much for sharing. Anybody else? Would anybody like to share? Yeah, over here.
Hello?
Hello.
Well, my reason was because I wanted to read a book.
All right, great.
Because it was a book saga, and just the first 3 parts was translated in Spanish.
All right.
And the rest in English. So I wanted so desperate to finish all the saga that I for myself to learn English.
Yeah, so you were forced to basically read everything. Great. Fabulous. And what about you?
I wanted to learn English because I wanted to expand my frontiers of knowing and learning from other people's as a businessman to to show my ideas and my business to the world.
Great. Yes. All right. One more person. Would anybody like to mention his? I bet everybody up there, you all have some reasons also, and you had some reasons when you started. Anybody else over here? You there? Denise, there is one over there. All right.
Hey, how are you?
Hello.
So, has anyone here played Pokemon before? Well, when I was 14 years old, I played Pokemon for the first time, and the level of my Pokemon rose, and I didn't understand what a flower had to do with anything.
All right, yeah.
So I decided to learn for myself what it meant. So it meant that the level was rising, and I went like, oh, okay, so what they teach me at school is not sufficient.
Yes.
And I started to learn by myself to gain more access to, well, video games and other medias.
Yes.
To start reading novels that I liked that were only available in English, for instance.
Great, fantastic. And there was obviously a real purpose for doing so. Great.
Yeah, just a dumb purpose, but a purpose nonetheless.
Great. Okay, sure.
Hi. Yeah.
Hello.
I started learning English because I was bitter. My brother was learning English and I wasn't yet.
All right.
And my brother struggled a lot with languages. And at first I didn't think it was as hard. So my older brother was better than me at everything else. And it was like the only thing I could do better than him.
All right.
So it was like the thing that pushed me to learn English more, year after year, improving my English and stuff.
Sure, yeah. Good, great, good example, Dan. Thank you very much, Denise. Now we move into another controversial topic. Is it a myth or a fact? EFL teachers, we normally hear things like this, like if you learn Spanish, and we normally tell you, maybe some of your teachers told you this at school, you learned Spanish, you were competent, and you were really intelligent because you learned Spanish, you can perfectly learn English now. There wouldn't be any problem because you speak already one language. So the controversy here is because teachers most of the time try to reproduce the same process the students you undertook when learning Spanish and turn it into a new process and help you to learn a foreign or second language. So is this a myth or a fact? I will be answering this in a few seconds. This is the statement. It says, if you speak a first language, Spanish in your case, it is easier, or it will be easier for you to learn a second, or in your case, English as a foreign language. Do you agree or do you disagree with this? I'll give you 1 minute to process this and try to make up your mind and make a decision about this. Is it real or not? Come on. What do you think? So similar or different over here? Similar or different process? Yeah, sure.
How could you not speak a language first before
everyone has
a first language? Yes, so the statement is, if you speak one language, will it be easier to learn English? Of course. Is that an advantage or disadvantage? Is it the same? Does it contribute? That's the question. A second in this case. Yes, so the question is, if you speak Spanish, does it guarantee that you will learn English? Yes or no? That's the statement. That's the controversy. Similar or different process? All right. And then English. Right. Good. So, yeah. Yes. I will answer in a few seconds. All right. Time is up. Time is up. Everybody, pay attention. So everybody has one opinion about this. Some of you agree on this. Some of you disagree with this statement. I will tell you now that the process, according to latest research, the process is different. Learning English would differ from learning a first language. And there are three main reasons why, and that explain why the process would be different. These are the three main reasons. First, as you said, you already speak a language, so that makes the process completely different, right? You don't start from anything and then you move into other stages for language acquisition or language learning. So the first reason is you already know one language. The process is different immediately. The second reason is you are cognitively mature. What does it mean to be cognitively mature? What it means is when you learned Spanish, when you were kids, you could talk about simple, shallow things, and you may have the tendency to talk about the same simple, shallow things when you are learning English. However, you are now cognitively mature. So if you learn and you are learning English now, you use English as a vehicle to talk about more complex or advanced or sophisticated ideas. So you can now use English to talk about business, to talk about politics, to talk about your preferences, to talk about your family, to talk about experiences in the past, projects in the future. So in the past, I mean, when you learned Spanish, you couldn't talk about that when you were kids, right? And you could have been exposed to different languages and learned English, Japanese, Portuguese, but still you would have been able to talk about very simple things. So now the second idea has to do with how complex the process is, but it demonstrates that there are intelligent people who know and who have a lot to say about business, politics, music, and English can facilitate and foster and encourage you to talk about those topics as well, right? So you don't learn English to talk only about hello, fine, how are you, good, but you can use English to give a speech or to talk about, as I said a few minutes ago, complex things or a book or a story, all right, or a review. And the third important aspect why the process would be different is the fact that, rightly or wrongly, students like you might make assumptions about the way the language learning process would operate or would work. What I'm trying to say, number 3, is most of the time you would refer to Spanish, and that may cause wrong translation because you may assume that you may pronounce this word as in Spanish. So all the problems you may encounter, or some of the problems you may have speaking in English, is because you may refer to your first language, right? Here we've got some examples of problems because of the context, which has to do with the third aspect. So these are real examples, all right? So the first one was recently online. A student who answered to a test in an English class, the student tried to say the tickets are sold out, but the student wrote the students are exhausted. In parentheses, what the student tried to say. Okay, so we assume that the student looked it up in a dictionary and it makes sense in Spanish, so this may be the word. Unfortunately, it is not, right? And that wasn't the right answer. Drink a chair rather than take a seat or take a chair, another typical problem because of translation. Can I have a brown? Brown is a color. The student must have checked this in a dictionary, but can I have a coffee? The correct word. And the classical, my friend is embarrassed, meaning, or trying to mean, my friend is pregnant. I am quite sure Denise may have a lot of other examples because of the context or because of translating literally or because we normally assume things because of our first language. Now, so far, I've been talking about the importance of technology, that under certain circumstances, and that is the most important point I am making, under certain circumstances, technology can help people to learn a language. Second of all, I've been talking about purposes and reasons for learning English, and I'll be talking about lingua franca, which is a concept that linguists and teachers of English normally know, and it's important for you to know about that cultural access you may have because of English, which is not only for academic purposes or for interacting, but English may also help you access other lifestyles and other communities as well. Now I will be talking about a pessimistic view that comes from linguistics. Even though we've got access, we've got technology, and we've got a lot of reasons for learning English, there is something that is called the critical period. The critical period is not something negative, it's something positive. It is the process in which the brain has the plasticity to absorb languages, all right? So there is evidence of this deadline in a first language. So if you, when you were children, hadn't been exposed to Spanish, you wouldn't have learned Spanish at all, right? And it was because of the critical period, the process, again, in which the brain is prepared to absorb languages. After a period of time, that intellectual task would be impossible, right? Now, this critical period has been explored a lot for a second or foreign language, and the evidence shows that over the years, you struggle a lot with learning English, all right? In that diagram, you can see the latest investigation or research on the critical period for a second language or a foreign language. The most important fact or aspect about the critical period is the fact that in terms of pronunciation, after some period of time, you will never ever, and that has been demonstrated, sound or speak like a native speaker, all right? You may reach native-like pronunciation, very good English. You can improve, cognitively speaking, a lot in terms of grammar, vocabulary, very advanced in expressions, but sounding like a native speaker wouldn't be possible, and it won't be possible. There are a few cases which sounds that are similar to native speakers, but in one way or another, people find out they are not really native speakers, right? Maybe because they are using expressions that are extremely formal in informal context, but they will never be native speakers. So the implications of the critical period is you will never sound like a native speaker, so that shouldn't be a reason for learning English, and that shouldn't be a clear objective. You can learn English, of course, and you can learn English and improve in such a way that you can have conversations, you can interact with people, and you can convey or negotiate meaning, which is the crucial and most important aspect of learning a language. So, the older you get, the more difficult the process gets, right? So, I said at the beginning, and I've been talking during these minutes and this time about the importance of learning a language and the fact that there must be a real purpose for learning English. Before the 90s, in Chile in particular, English was miles away. People would never learn English because they would ever travel. I remember somebody said that. They would ever travel abroad, or they would ever become linguists. There were other reasons, certainly, in the past for learning languages, and people had less access, little access to real communication. There weren't enough native speakers to practice with, so now we've got a different picture. This picture shows, I told you at the beginning that I was a music lover, so this shows what I obtained or how I benefited from learning English. So I met my favorite singers, I showed you the records at the beginning, and we could talk not only about simple, shallow things, but we could talk about complex ideas, we could talk about politics, music, interests, we could talk about our past experiences. I could also travel abroad and study and improve some skills, and I could also make very good friends from other cultures, as I mentioned about lingua franca. So, I said that there must be a real purpose for learning English, any other than to make more money or to get a better job, right? Or to have more economic access. There should be other real purposes for learning the language. So now, the invitation I promised, okay? So if you believe that every person in Chile should or must have access to excellent English language education, and you believe that there must be a purpose for doing so, could you please stand up? So that's fair to say that it's almost everyone in the hall who believe that we need better English education. This video shows the different part of the story, right? Let me see if it works now.
Hi Carlos, how are you?
Hi Sarah, I'm okay, thanks. And you?
Good. Do you want to go to class?
Okay, come on.
All right, so thank you very much. That's the end of my talk. Thank you very much. So now we've got some time for questions, right? Slot for questions from the audience. I will be glad to answer any questions you may have.
Hi.
Hello.
A question about the critical period.
All right.
The critical period was for your first language, or can be also second one, third one?
Yeah, the critical period for the first language has been proven, that's for sure. If a child is not exposed to any language, that child wouldn't out of the sudden speak a language. So for the first language, that has been demonstrated. Now, for a second language, it has been demonstrated in terms of pronunciation. So people learning English or Spanish as a second or foreign language will improve in many other areas because you are very clever, so you will learn more vocabulary, syntax, but in terms of pronunciation, you will never reach native-like or native pronunciation. And well, and that's why I mentioned the fact that the older you are, the more difficult the process becomes. Yes. Is that okay? Are there any questions from the audience about over here, Denise?
Over there.
I didn't understand. Hello.
Hello.
I didn't understand the lingua franca stuff. Is it the dominant language that will be?
Yes. Lingua franca, always associate lingua franca with a bridge. So it's a bridge among cultures. It's the language that takes over or dominates a conversation around the world. So if you go to Italy and there are people from Spain, there are Italian as well, there are Chileans, and there are British people, the language that will dominate so that they can have a conversation will be English. So English as a lingua franca means the predominant language to facilitate communication among cultures. No problem. Over here, another question over there.
Hi.
Hello.
What happens with people who had lived in another country? Can they speak like native?
Well, that depends on many different factors. That depends on the age you went to that different country. That depends on the amount of exposure. I mentioned that in the presentation you had during the years you were abroad, and that has to do with practice as well. I've heard about people going abroad and coming back with the same level of English because they had no exposure, no practice. But I have also heard of people traveling abroad, being exposed to the language, and coming back as a bilingual person. Yes. So there are many different factors and variables to consider in that question. Yes. Is that okay? Yes. Are there any questions from the audience?
Is there any other question? Oh,
over there. Thank you very much, Denise.
Do you think that the lingua franca will change? Like nowadays it is English. Do you think in any time in the future it will change to another language?
Well, languages vary and they transform and evolve as society evolves as well. So I wouldn't discard that really, but that would take, we won't be alive by then. Okay, we might be dead if that ever occurs. All right, there's one question upstairs. here, right? Yeah.
Hello.
Hello.
Why do you think that English is the lingua franca? Because if you think Portuguese and Spanish and Italian are a lot similar,
All right.
and English is not.
All right. But anyhow, in some particular circumstances, like for example, to do business or to interact with English speakers, that would be the lingua franca. It's considered as that, even though you can perfectly communicate with, I mean, if I interact with people from Brazil or from Italy, I wouldn't go into English. But if there are English speakers, that will definitely be the vehicle to do so. Yeah, but I get your point. Yeah. Yes. There's one more question upstairs, I think. Yeah. Over there, yeah.
I can understand clearly what mean cognitively mature and the second point about difference between learning English to Spanish, for example.
Yeah, sure. I'll go over that immediately. So what I meant there, over here, when you were children, you had no cognitive talent because you didn't have anything to talk about except for the words you were learning as you were very young, like milk, mom, feed me, hungry, right? Even in Spanish, I mean the same process in Spanish, in Italian, in Portuguese. So cognitively mature means you've got more intelligence, to call it in that way, which is a risk, but to be more intelligent to talk about more complex topics. So now you learn English not because you want to ask your mom to feed you or to give you cookies or biscuits, but you learn English because you want to use it to talk about complex ideas like business, politics, music. Definitely those topics couldn't have been used or couldn't have been covered when you were children, right? Unless you were very, very intelligent, all right? Is that clear now?
Yeah, thanks.
Right, thank you very much.
Francisco, thank you so much for coming today.
Thank you very much, Denise, for the invitation. Thank you, everybody, for your lovely support.
And we're ready for your questions.
All right, now I will be projecting my questions to you. So, just a second. I hope you get a 7. So, question number 1. So the first question is, can you mention one reason why learning a first language differs from learning a second language? I mentioned 3 reasons. You can mention one of the 3 reasons, and probably you can provide some examples of what I said. And the second question is, what point or what points does the speaker make concerning the role of technology when learning English? You can also provide some examples of technology or exposure to technology I mentioned during the presentation. I mentioned a lot of different ideas to obtain exposure or access to English. All right? Great.
20 minutes. 10 minutes. Five minutes. 3 more minutes. All right, students, time's up. So can you please finish up your quizzes?